The Handmaid's Tale is one of the most frequently banned books in the world. It was the 9th most banned book in American schools in 2023, with bans in 67 locations. Just this week in September 2025, it was banned in all school libraries across the state of Alberta, Canada. Oh, Canada. Yet despite all these bans, the book has been a continual success since its publication way back in 1985. There was the film version in 1990, the recently widely acclaimed TV series starring Elizabeth Moss, and the sequel novel, The Testaments, written nearly 35 years after the original. The Handmaid's Tale has sold over 8 million copies, and has seen significant surges in sales, both when the TV series debuted and after the 2016 and 2024 US presidential elections. This book refuses to go away.
It's relevant as hell!
In 2022, the author Margaret Atwood teamed up with Penguin Random House in a publicity stunt of creating an unburnable copy of The Handmaid's Tale and then trying to burn it with a flamethrower. This was an acknowledgement of how often this book is banned and a protest of censorship and book banning. This is the book that wouldn't burn. So today, we are going to talk about both The Handmaid's Tale and The Testaments. We're going to see if they're worth reading, because let's face it, most of us are vaguely familiar with this concept, but how many of us have actually read the books? Hi, I'm the book guy. Now, normally my videos have a super cheesy intro with happy saxophone music. We're not doing that today, it'd be wildly inappropriate, but I am here to tell you about these books spoiler-free and help you decide if you want to read them. We'll look at the deeper themes and the historical references of these books, and we'll even discuss how they tie into the TV show for existing fans. Let's begin. In the very near future, the United States has fallen, and in its place rises the Republic of Gilead. Gilead is a brutal, fundamentalist regime that forces all people into strict, regressive social roles, based very loosely on puritanical beliefs. At the very bottom of this social hierarchy are the handmaidens. The world is facing widespread infertility and plummeting birth rates, and the handmaids are the rare few fertile women who must reproduce to keep the population alive. They are constantly told that theirs is an honored position, yet in reality they are little more than sexual slaves. This is the story of Offred, known simply as of Fred, since she is owned by her commander. Her real name is forgotten. This is the story of her life under the new regime and her struggle to retain her identity and reclaim any sense of freedom. This story is a very specific genre known as speculative fiction. It's all about speculating on what the future might hold, or how a certain concept might play out. It's a thought experiment. Now, usually speculative fiction gets paired with science fiction, and we set the story in a far distant future. But in this case, it's set in the near future, almost the now. And it's about exploring the concept of living under an authoritarian government. We see in flashbacks small glimpses of how the United States was overthrown. We hear rumors of wars and rebellions and colonies filled with nuclear waste. There are multiple theories on why the birth rate is declining. There's a lot of big stuff all happening in the background. And yet, the most fascinating part of this speculative fiction is that we never really see the big picture. After all, this is The Handmaid's Tale. The world is only seen through the eyes of the lowest person of society. Offred doesn't know all the truth of the details. She only knows what she can see for herself. In that sense, this is an extremely personal story of life under oppression. It's one person's story. It's not about the statistics or the death tolls or big government edicts. Instead, we see the cost of oppression on just one person. It has a powerful humanizing effect, enabling the reader to picture ourselves in the position of the oppressed. In this dystopian society, we're We're not the evil emperor or the glorious rebel. No, we are the lowest of the low. Also noteworthy is that this story is set in the former United States, very close to home for readers in the Western world. This book speculates on the loss of human rights and personal liberties in the land of the free itself. Because people often think this could never happen to me, that sort of thing happens far away. Instead, this book speculates on the question, what if it did? Yes, this book is based on speculation, so much so that there's actually not much else in the way of character and plot. So obviously, there is a plot, and there are characters, but they're not as important to this story as the world building and the thought experiment. After all, the book is only 320 pages long, so the plot exists mainly as a means to get the reader from one set piece to another, all to explore life in this totalitarian regime. The character writing is all very subtle. After all, people from all walks of life are largely dehumanized by this power structure. All creativity and individualism has been stripped away as people are forced into strict social roles. Therefore, our characters are essentially wearing a mask at all times. It's difficult to see who they truly are. In many ways, all the supporting characters exist to offer viewpoints of the different roles and classes within this fascist society. They're all part of the hierarchy. They all have a job to do. The best character work is Offred herself. Now, our leading protagonist is a strangely neutral character. She's clearly someone that the audience is meant to project themselves onto, and yet we see her state of mind go through several major turns throughout this book. We see the effect that this cruel world has on her. We see her struggle to keep it together. So despite the story emphasizing concept over character, there's still real heart to this book. Let me show you how that's done. Handmaid's Tale has a very unique writing style. It's all told as if it's an oral history, as if Offred herself is speaking everything out loud and retelling her story. Yet the narration has an almost dream-like quality to it. Offred is not a broken, weeping protagonist. She's happy and comfortable, kinda.
I'm fine! Totally fine!
The narrator talks about this country as if it's not that bad. A lot of things are different, but many things are better. It reads as if the narrator is trying to convince themselves that this is okay. And yet there is something off about it all, an undertone of creepy, unsettling dystopia. This is the real strength of the book, in my humble opinion, to show us, the reader, how easy it is to accept something so heinous. Offred accepts this life and has learned to assimilate. All those thoughts that maybe something is wrong, they get shoved to the back of her mind. Then, as the book progresses and her mental health begins to show strain, the story skips around a bit more. We see flashbacks and regrets. The skipping of time adds to the dreamlike quality. I just love this technique so much because it means the story is not aggressively preaching its message. In fact, the message is almost hidden underneath the thin veneer of the narrator's mindset. We, the reader, have to peer behind the curtain to understand what's really going on. It forces the reader to pay attention and to think about its themes. Speaking of themes, we're going to talk about them now. Just keep in mind, many of these themes apply equally to both books, but we're going to do themes first and then move on to the second book. Cool? Theme number 1. People often consider The Handmaid's Tale to be feminist literature. That's absolutely true, and I do not want to take away from that in any regard, but it's not entirely accurate. There are many themes to the story, of which feminism is one of them. Yet perhaps one theme that is overemphasized? Just hear me out. The author herself has said that The Handmaid's Tale is a study in power, and how it operates and how it deforms or shapes the people who are living within that kind of regime. This obviously applies to women's empowerment and disempowerment within the story, but it also applies to the power structures within societies, governments, law enforcement agencies, religions, personal liberty, church and state, and many more. One of the main questions behind the book is, what would you do if your power was taken away?
I am not a number. I am a free man.
I think one of the reasons why this book is so widely known for its feminist themes is because it's one of the few dystopian societies that actually focus on gender roles. Usually dystopia books like 1984, Fahrenheit 451, or The Hunger Games focus heavily on topics like propaganda, government oversight, and the control of information. But because the Republic of Gilead is a fundamentalist/fascist society, the focus is much more on minorities. People are separated and valued according to their race, religion, gender, and sexual identities. There are small, subtle lines in the book that hint at the purges in the past. Purges that targeted different races and minorities. And we can clearly see how everyone in the book now is very much straight, white American. So the story is definitely talking about the false belief of racial supremacy. There is widespread oppression for all minorities who do not comply. Yet because the story is told through the eyes of a handmaiden, the hard majority of the oppression we see in the story is because of her gender. Do you see the distinction? Fascism's bad for everyone, that's kind of the point. As an aside here, we see the theme of power demonstrated further in these sex scenes. So the first book is frequently banned on the grounds of being sexually explicit. But in fact, there are only 2 sex scenes, and they're not even slightly explicit. In both cases, the scene is not about the sex. It's actually about who holds the power during the sex. Whether one person has total dominion over another, or if there's equality. Another common reason why the book is so frequently banned is because of its other big theme. Gilead is a depiction of religious extremism. This has led many readers to view the book as being anti-Christian, yet the author herself is quoted as saying, "It's not anti-religion, it's against the use of religion as a front for tyranny," which is a different thing altogether. It's true that the people of Gilead draw heavily from the Bible and Christianity as a basis for their faith, but there are numerous instances in the book that point out their own hypocrisy, showing the difference between their version of the faith and what the Bible actually teaches. Authority figures in Gilead frequently quote from the Bible, but they get it wrong. In fact, the narrator catches these inaccuracies and then points them out to the reader. There are also machines that constantly write automatic prayers to God, almost like AI-generated prayers. There's several references to uprisings and rebellions by Christian groups, including both Baptists and Quakers, who fought against Gilead. And there are stories taken out of context from the Bible and used very literally. So the book explores how tyranny can pervert and corrupt a religion and twist it to meet the desires of the ruling class, which frankly should not be that much of a shock. I mean, the Bible itself has multiple warnings against false teachers, false prophets, false apostles, and false Christs. It's a common theme in scripture, and this book affirms that theme. So depictions of false Christianity in a book should not be cause for banning that book. Not to mention, Christianity is not the only religion that has this problem. There are many religions that are used as a front for tyranny, just like Gilead. Tyrants use these religions as justification for acts of cruelty and dominance. And if you criticize those tyrannical governments for violating human rights, you are seen to be attacking the religion that they adopted, perverted, and now use as a shield to hide behind. But tyranny is still tyranny, no matter how you dress it up. In fact, we see religion being used as a front for tyranny time and time again throughout history. But that's not the only historical parallel in these books. When the novel first came out, people would claim that the author had exaggerated the details of dystopia to extreme levels. So Margaret Atwood became famous for carrying newspaper clippings with her into her interviews. This was, of course, in the age before the internet. She carried evidence of how authoritarianism had done in real life all the things in the novel. She even goes so far as to say that there's nothing in the book that has not happened at some point in history. None of it is exaggerated. The obvious example of a fascist takeover is from Nazi Germany. Hitler dismantled the democracy of Germany in a matter of days. Meanwhile, all the people were told to continue with life as per normal. Everyone carried on without changing their routine. They remained silent. But another Nazi parallel is, unfortunately, the impregnation of women in a program called Lebensborn. Germans kidnapped blonde-haired, blue-eyed women from occupied territory and forced them to create pure Aryan babies as part of their eugenics program. But another major historical example is the Iranian Revolution in 1979, which occurred just 6 years before the book was released and was heavily involved in inspiring the story. Islamic extremism was used as a front for tyranny. After the takeover, women's rights were widely restricted. Although I've got to add important context here, Iran had a democracy until 1953 when the CIA and M16 backed an Iranian coup to displace the democratically elected prime minister because he wouldn't let the West have oil. The coup created destabilization and civil unrest in Iran, which in turn allowed authoritarianism to take over. Another historical reference in the book is the handmaids themselves. This is directly from the Bible, where a slave would perform the role of a concubine and bear children for their masters. Famous examples include the 12 sons of Jacob, 4 of which were through handmaidens. Although important context, this was common practice at the time across multiple cultures. Another example is the patronymic names. The handmaidens have names like Offred or of Warren, where they are named after the patriarch who presides over them. This was largely popular in Roman times. I mean, the Emperor Claudius had 4 children and called them all Claudius or Claudia, but this is extremely common all over the world. In fact, many popular last names have this trait, such as Anderson, Fitzgerald, Rodriguez, Grigorovich. All of those names come from different cultural backgrounds and are all named after the father. The book also gives us the Underground Railroad, where people try to smuggle handmaidens out of the country. That's a deliberate reference to slavery in America and attempts to help slaves escape. And there's the taking of children. So, in the book, handmaidens must surrender their children over to the commanders and their wives, who are considered higher stock and more fit to be parents. This refers to both American and Australian history of stealing indigenous children from their parents and giving them to white people in a horrendous act of cultural erasure. I believe that's enough examples. So, as you can see, nothing in this book is made up or exaggerated. The only thing unique about this setting is the combination of factors. That's what makes this such a great example of speculative fiction. It's all believable because it's all happened before. Now, let's take a look at the TV show and how it compares to the book. If you're a fan of the show and you've never read a book, you're probably wondering if it's going to be worth your time. Do they just tell the same story? Well, yes, this is a very faithful adaptation. In terms of accurately portraying the story on film, it's like a 9 out of 10, very accurate. But there are still important differences, which is why I think it's worth experiencing the story in both formats. The big difference is that the book is almost entirely adapted in just season 1. That season is mostly just what we get in the book. The exceptions are that there's more focus on the supporting characters, so many of them get their own subplots and their own flashbacks. And towards the end of season 1, we start getting new plot lines introduced. It's clearly setting up season 2, since many of those plot lines aren't in the book. However, seasons 2 to 6 are an entirely original story. They continue to explore the themes and the world of the book and go beyond. Now, I've only watched season 1, but the author herself was involved in the writing process as a consultant from day 1 and all through the show's production. In fact, she even has this cameo in the first episode. The show has continued to be critically acclaimed all through its run, so it's not like Game of Thrones where things just fell apart once they went beyond the books. Another big difference is the tone. So the book's tone has that dream-like quality to the writing, where everything is actually quite pleasant, with an undertone of dystopia. Whereas the show is much more aggressive in showing just how bad things are. In the show, there's close-up reaction shots, there's haunting music, and there's a lot more violence on screen. In the book, the violence is mostly entirely off-screen. This leads us to another difference: resistance. The book is simply not about resistance. Everyone has more or less accepted the world as it is. They may be unhappy or even hate it, but they also conform because everyone else is conforming. It's a lot like that Terry Pratchett quote from Discworld. They accept evil, not because they say yes, but because they don't say no. The book shows a dystopian fascist government takeover that the people don't question. People don't challenge it or fight back because they don't understand the threat for what it is. By the time they do understand, it's too late.
In a gradually heating bathtub, you'd be boiled to death before you knew it.
That's why the book has this pleasant tone, because it's the tone of submission and obedience. Meanwhile, the TV show has so much more resistance. We have multiple scenes that show the violence of the takeovers. We see gunmen evicting women from the workplaces, or opening fire on protesters, or shooting people who try to escape. There is a clear, obvious death threat that enforces people's compliance. And we see more instances of people fighting back, people who are unwilling to accept their enslavement and will risk death to resist. For example, our main character is called Offred, but in the TV show, they give her a name, and she frequently uses her real name as a form of resistance and reclaiming her identity. This is why I say it's worth both reading the book and watching the show, because in many ways they show a completely different style of government takeover. In one version, Gilead comes to power because the people are inactive and silent. In another version, we have a violent, brutal takeover that is enforced at the point of a gun. Both of these versions have a historical precedent. Sometimes when people lose their freedom, it happens in the shadows and people stay quiet. Other times it's through open, violent enforcement. Another difference is there is the character of Offred's mother. Now, she's in the book, but all of her scenes were moved to season 2 instead, so that's one adaptation plotline that's shifted over. Offred's mother is very outspoken about feminism and women's rights. It's sort of implied that she's very much a second wave feminist from the 60s. Both Offred and her husband politely listen to her but don't really see what the big deal is. They scoff at the topic of women's rights in the past, in stark contrast to the total lack of rights Offred experiences in the present. Her mother is a warning that they ignored. The final difference between the book and TV show is the villains. You see, the book doesn't really have villains. Everyone has their role to play in society. In a way, everyone is a victim of the greater power structure. Even the commander is shown to be very unhappy. But in the show, all of our villain characters are dialed up. Like Aunt Lydia, Mrs. Waterford, and the commander are all various levels of sadistic and cruel. It's a fair addition to the show, especially if they wanted to extend it into 6 seasons. Although it does lessen the message that no one is truly happy under fascism. If you didn't know, the show has actually finished with the most recent season 6, but the show creators fully intend to continue the story by adapting the Testaments. With that in mind, let's move on and look at the second book in this world. It's 15 years later. The cracks are beginning to show in society. Gilead is at risk of collapse. This book has 3 protagonists and each has their own story. First is Aunt Lydia, the woman in charge of the Handmaid's program, returning from the first story. Lydia spent such a long time at the top, or at least as high as a woman can get in Gilead. Yet her position is in danger. There have already been purges among the leadership, and Lydia suspects that another one is coming. What will she do to keep herself safe? Agnes is a young woman living in Gilead, and she's one of the lucky ones. She's the daughter of a powerful commander, and she's in training to become a wife, one of the most highly esteemed positions in Gilead. Agnes has this blissful existence where everything seems to be fair and just, yet she's about to grow up for the first time and understand the truth of her situation and her privilege. And Daisy is a young girl living in Canada. She, like the rest of the world, is completely appalled by Gilead and all the horrible stories they hear coming out of that country. She sees how the leaders of Gilead lie to the rest of the world. Daisy wants nothing to do with them. Yet Daisy is already connected to this dark regime in ways she cannot imagine. All 3 of these women have a part to play in shaping the world. The Handmaid's Tale only shows us Gilead through the eyes of a handmaid, the lowest position, but the Testaments expands our worldview and adds an enormous amount of new perspectives. Lydia allows us to look behind the curtain of leadership. Agnes shows us what life is like for many average citizens, highlighting how and why so many people accept this. And Daisy shows us the international perspective of how the rest of the world reacts to Gilead. So book 2 is not simply coming back to the same place, it's exploring that place even deeper and in completely different areas. There's a surprising amount of new content and ideas. It's almost as if the real world just keeps giving us examples of fascist governments to draw inspiration from. It's also important to realize that authoritarian regimes affect everyone to some extent, and they affect us all differently. Some people may indeed be well off under fascism, and therefore they're willing to turn a blind eye to all those people who are worse off. That's how atrocities are permitted.
That applies to them, not me.
Yet despite the expanded world building, there's another significant shift in the second book. While The Handmaid's Tale was focused entirely on speculative fiction, the Testament tells a much stronger story. There's deeper character work with real character arcs. There's multiple plot lines that are all balanced, and there's even multiple surprises. All three of our protagonists have much more distinct voices. Where Offred was more neutral so that the reader could project themselves onto her, our current three voices have much more personality. Aunt Lydia is passionate about protecting her handmaidens. Agnes dreams of finding a handsome husband and raising a family. And Daisy has her own hopes and dreams, which I can't really get into. So book 2 is not a shameless sequel or cash grab 35 years after the original. It's a worthy follow-up. In many ways, it's a better novel. But why did Margaret Atwood write a sequel all this time later? Well, it was to answer some of the questions she kept getting over and over. The big question everyone kept asking was, that's kind of the painful part of The Handmaid's Tale. It doesn't end with the heroes rising up and throwing the Emperor down a shaft and saving the galaxy. Gilead is well and truly established and powerful, and it seems like nothing can dislodge them. So readers kept asking the author, surely this can't last forever, how does Gilead fall? The Testaments attempt to answer this question to some extent, because authoritarian regimes don't last forever. It's true, empires rise and fall, and every tyrant falls eventually. Of course, in the movies, the emperors are overthrown by heroic chosen ones, and noble rebels fight the good fight. In reality, a regime collapse can be incredibly messy. Sometimes these regimes implode. The leaders turn on each other when their egos get too big, or corruption goes too far, and infighting gets out of control. Other times, regimes fall when neighboring countries rise up and cast down the dictator and establish the rule of law once more. Or sometimes the people rise up, when they realize that everything they were promised didn't eventuate and the lies are finally exposed. Yet the Testaments really only hints at these possible outcomes. It doesn't present one as the perfect correct option, this is how you overthrow tyranny. In fact, there's a note from the author at the end of the book that says there are no surefire formulas, since very little in history is inevitable. It's important to remember that even though all tyrants fall eventually, we can never guarantee how and when they will fall. So you gotta keep your options open. You may expect a pretty extreme content warning for such a commonly banned book, yet these books are surprisingly medium. There's mostly just a lot of mature themes and dark content. Most of the violence occurs off-screen. There are public executions, but that's about as violent as it gets. There's a lot of discussions around sexual assaults, and yet there's only one scene of it per book, and they're both as quick and as brief as possible, sparing many of the details. And there's a few instances of swearing. That's about it. So for a book that's banned so much for supposed content, it's not really that extreme. It's almost as if it's the themes that get it banned. Nah, it couldn't be that. Is the ending worth it? So avoiding spoilers here, but these books aren't Well, they're not happy Hollywood endings. Things are deliberately vague and unresolved. After all, this is speculative fiction. It's speculating on the future, and we can't guarantee how things will turn out. If we see fascists take over, we cannot guarantee that they'll be defeated this time. It's an important lesson that the books teach. It may be slightly unsatisfying for the readers if you're not expecting that sort of thing, but it's an important piece of historical accuracy. And how much should you try? Well, both of these books are very short, at 320 pages and 380, so they're an easy read. Yet they're very different. Handmaid's is all about speculative fiction, and The Testaments is focused more on story and character. So you may appreciate them both for different reasons. You'll have to decide for yourself if you're only interested in one or both of them. Either way, I hope you will pick up these books, see why The Handmaid's Tale is so frequently banned, and think the thoughts they don't want you to think. So good luck and happy reading. Thanks for watching. If you want to support my work, please consider buying my own books, The Immortal Investigations. You can also check out my shop and my Patreon, and please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Tell me your thoughts on The Handmaid's Tale below, and please recommend any other banned books you think I should review, because I am very open to that suggestion. Well, I'll see you next time. I hope you enjoy a good book today. Bye!